So I moved my chair in here. I'm not quite sure how close I can get in here, but I think I have enough here. One thing I did want to do is go back to the tool, and I was going to gauge this for you guys so you could see. This is my wire gauge. It's like 8 gauge. So whatever that turns into, 8 gauge is, what is 8 gauge? 0.128, according to this. So I'm sure you can find some 0.125 steel. That's probably what this is actually. And make your tool out of that, okay? So I think I am going to weave, I have more 24 gauge than I do 22 gauge, so I think I'll weave one out of 24 gauge. Gold, I have some that I made out of gold that are 24 gauge. I've done 26 gauge. It depends on like how fine you want it and how much you want to deal with. I've actually woven some chains, I've woven some chains out of 10 karat gold. At the end of the wire, it gets really stiff and it gets kind of hard to work with. So be prepared for some of the pieces to kind of break off and cause problems. But I would suggest 24 gauge, 14, 18. I wove a chain out of 18 karat royal yellow gold from Hoover and Strong. One of the most awesome chains I've ever made. The thing was like butter when it was done. So 18 karat gold works really well. I'm sure you could do 20 karat if you wanted to do that too, or 22 or whatever. Don't do fine gold. You don't need to do that. Just, that's up to you. But anyway, so I'm going to use 24 gauge. The way I do this, and I can't show you how to do this, but since you want all of your pieces of wire to be the same size, I usually unspool this a little bit, and I hold the end of the wire up to my nose, and I extend my arm out, and wherever the wire comes to at the end of my pointer finger, holding it straight out from the side of my body, that's where I cut it. It usually ends up being 3 feet. Some of you are going to have much shorter arms than I do. I'm tall and I have long arms. So you could try working with shorter pieces of wire. If you don't want to do the arm thing, then I suggest you just cut 3 feet pieces of wire, and then they're all exactly the same size, and you can kind of go from there. I think it's really probably better to do that anyway. The reason I think 3 feet is a good size, if you make these chains the way I make them and you do them in like 5 or 6 courses, the setup of the beginning loops takes up so much wire that you're not going to have enough wire out of, say, 2 feet of wire to then start your chain. So I like to start with at least 3 feet. If you want to back off as you go and do like 2.5 pieces, 2.5 feet, that's fine. I think that's probably okay. Again, the beauty of these chains and the best way to approach these chains is to keep everything the same. So equal pieces of wire, same size loops, same thing, so on and so forth, okay? So I'm gonna do this off camera. I'm just gonna hold this out from my nose. And it comes to about right here. It's about 3 feet. I'm gonna cut, and it's gonna unspool like crazy because I didn't hold on to it. That's okay. There it goes. So here's my piece of wire. I don't know if you can see the whole thing or not. Now, the critical part here is getting this thing started. So I'm going to wheel myself over here, and I'm going to try to do this where you can see my hands. You can do these in, I call them courses. They kind of, let me pull that one out again that I had here before. This is a 4-course chain, I believe. I have a whole bunch of them in here. Meaning, if you looked at this thing really closely, it's got 4 vertical courses running up and down the chain, which means there's, at one point, if you were looking down at the chain, where's that little broken piece that I had? If you were looking down at the chain, this little thing here, if you look down at the top of it, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 loops, okay? You can do 3 courses, you can do 4, you can do 5, you can do 6, you can do 7. You can't do 2. 2 doesn't work. You'd be going back and forth and it would be a zigzag and it wouldn't work quite right. 3s go pretty quick. They're hard to weave because if you think about the nature of geometry, a triangle shape, which is basically what that chain would be, you'd be bringing a piece of wire in. It probably wouldn't be too bad. I think I've actually done a 3 before. I don't have one here, but I usually just do 4 and 5. That's like my 5. 6, if I want to go bigger, This is a 5-loop 20 gauge. To get that size with 22 or 24 gauge, you'd have to go up to like a 6-course chain, okay? So it depends on how big you want your chain. But I usually just make them where they're about this size. I don't think I need anything larger than that, and it just depends on how big of a piece I'm making. Anyway, the critical part here, I'm going to move some of this out of the way so you can see this. And I'm going to double check really quickly just to make sure that my hands are in the right spot. Okay, so if I'm going to do a 5-loop chain, I'm going to start with one end of the wire, and I am going to use my 2 fingers. I have big hands. If you have little hands, it's not a big deal. It's still going to work. I start with the wire on the inside of my hand with the piece down, pointing to my middle finger. You do not have to make it go all the way down. I'm just going to kind of hold it there, okay? I'm going to go around once. Now here's where it gets kind of tricky. Don't let your fingers, my fingers come together at an angle, okay? So as you're wrapping, try to separate your fingers out so you've got a parallel line here. That kind of helps. I'm going to wrap around my fingers 5 times. And that's my 5 times. The last time, I'm sorry, went off the camera. The last time comes down the back and straight down. Okay, so if you look at this, here's where the wire started. Okay, got a loop there, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, then you carefully pull them off your hand. They do not have to be in any order. You can fix that later on. And you're left with this little bound thing with this little wire coming down the side. I then take these wires. Make sure this first piece, that's the beginning of the wire, is at least halfway down, if not more. You want it to come all the way down probably to the bottom, because we're going to crimp this wire in the middle, these loops, and push them together like a peanut. And you want to make sure that that original wire is down far enough that it gets underneath that crimp, because we're going to wrap the rest of the wire around here to kind of hold this in place. So I'm going to push these together, kind of like that. You can kind of see that. There's the little leftover wire. I've got enough there. Then the loop that's getting created from the remainder of the wire, I'm going to come down. It's going to get crimped as well. And then it's going to, let me get these all started. I'm going to take it. This is hard to do at this angle because I'm not used to doing it this way. I'm going to take this, turn it sideways, and I'm going to very carefully wrap. 1, 2, 3. That's probably plenty. Okay? So here, I'll hold this up so you can see it. It'll focus. Hold like that. So there's the remainder of the wire. I have about 1 foot left. I've created 5 loops here. There's only 4 loops here, and you can kind of see that little piece of metal left over right there. That's the beginning of the wire, okay? 3 wraps. Take your flat nose pliers and crimp that twist. And that really firmly holds those together, okay? Then what you want to do, this is the fun part, you want to open, I'm trying to do this and look at the camera at the same time. You want to open these loops and make a sunflower. I'm just trying to get them all situated just right. If they're overlapping on top of each other, it doesn't matter. Just get them situated where they're evenly spaced. See if I can get the camera to focus. Come on, camera. There. Sunflower. Okay? Then you take your little tool. Okay? You put it through one of the loops and you start twisting. Now don't pull too hard. If you pull these too hard, they have a tendency to pull out of this part down here, and then you have loops that are really long and some that are really short. So try to hold this with your hand, put that inside, and then very carefully, you don't need to do this very many times, just wrap it around until you have a nice loop on the end. Kind of see that? There, just like that. Okay, I'm going to do the other ones real quick. I'm probably not going to stay in focus. And they're not all going to be perfect. I'm going to show you that even if it doesn't look perfect, it's still going to work. Don't go crazy with weaving these or twisting these original wires. If you twist these too much, you're going to work hard in them so much that when you want to start weaving through them, you may run the risk of like the little head that you've created here breaking off, and then you have to try to figure out how to make a new head, and you're kind of messed up. Not fun. Okay. Okay, getting the last one. Then what I do, it's a lot of prep work, but once you do this a few times, it's really easy. Okay, so 5 little things twisted with loops. I then take my flat nose pliers and I bend these all up. I'm going to warn you what's probably going to happen the first time you do this. You're probably going to have 1 or 2 of these that are way too long. You've probably pulled on them too hard, and this one's a little tall right here. Actually, I probably should weave that one more time. I'm going to put another loop in that. So it's about the same. That one actually looks a little taller than the other ones. Let's say this loop comes out like way longer than these other ones that I created. Grab it. Here's the, if you can kind of see that. Let's see if I can show this. Take the pliers, grab it up a little bit on the wire, bend that part down, and then bend it up. And you've basically just shortened that wire. That little bend in there is not going to make a difference later on, okay? All I'm doing right now is getting them all situated to where they're all roughly the same height. They're all facing inward. These chains are kind of all about what's happening on the inside of the chain, in here, what's happening outside the chain, okay? Again, getting these all flat, getting them all set up. This is kind of the hardest part. I know this is a lot of detail, like in depth. Let me see what you're weaving. Anyway, kind of like that, okay? Push them closer together if you want. They don't have to be that far apart. And get them kind of situated, okay? Now, remember this piece of wire that's stuck off? This becomes what we're going to weave with. So we're going to take the end of this wire. See if I can show this. If my camera will focus. It's wanting to focus on the background. I may have to actually put this on manual focus. You're going to bring this wire into this wire up, pretend like it's coming back up through the middle. Remember what I said, inside of the chain, outside of the chain. Bring it up through one of the loops. Does not matter which one. I just try to make it go through one of these that's close to where it is kind of at the bottom. So if you can see that, if I can put my hand there, the wire is in essence coming from the inside of the chain through that loop and coming back towards the outside of the chain. Can you all see that? I'm going to pull it carefully. This first part is the hardest part. And what's going to happen, it's always going to make this weird loop. Okay? So twist that loop out. You don't want that loop there. Before you pull on it too hard to make a crimp. And you can see, there, it popped. It popped right through. So basically what you have now is, let's see if it'll focus. There. See the wire going from the inside of the loop through the loop to the outside. And that's basically how you start it. I'm going to pause here and I'll start the second part here in a second.